At first, I thought I was dreaming. The darkness surrounding me felt strange, heavy, almost liquid. My body refused to respond. My eyelids felt glued shut. My arms weighed 1,000 pounds. But my hearing worked perfectly, and I knew that voice. I had listened to it every day for nearly 2 decades. I had fallen asleep beside that voice. Built a family with that voice. Trusted that voice more than my own instincts. My wife, Danielle. "Let him die," she whispered again. A woman beside her inhaled sharply. "Mrs. Carter." The nurse sounded uncomfortable, uneasy, scared. Danielle lowered her voice even further. "If there are complications, don't fight too hard." Silence followed. My heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Inside my mind, panic exploded. What did she mean? Why would she say that? I tried to move. Nothing happened. I tried to open my eyes. Nothing. I tried to scream. My body betrayed me. The nurse finally spoke. "I can't do that," Danielle sighed. "I know what you're saying officially." Officially. The words sent ice through my veins. "Mrs. Carter, please stop." Footsteps followed. Then another voice entered the room. "A doctor." "Good morning." The conversation ended immediately, as if it had never happened, as if my entire world hadn't just collapsed. I lay there trapped inside my own body, listening, thinking, praying I had misunderstood. But deep down I already knew I hadn't, because over the last year, Danielle had changed. And now I wondered if I had ignored warning signs that should have terrified me. 3 days earlier, life had seemed completely normal. At least that's what I thought. I was driving home from work on a rainy Thursday evening. Traffic crawled through downtown Atlanta. The windshield wipers moved back and forth. The radio played quietly. I remember smiling because Danielle had texted me 20 minutes earlier. "Don't forget dinner at my sister's house. Love you." Simple. Normal. The kind of message married couples send every day. I had replied with a heart emoji. That was the last text I ever sent before the accident. The light turned green. Cars moved forward. Then everything changed. A black SUV appeared from nowhere. I still remember seeing headlights. Bright. Fast. Wrong. The vehicle crossed directly into my lane. There was no time to react. No time to brake. No time to think. The impact sounded like an explosion. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The steering wheel slammed into my chest. Pain flashed through my entire body. Then darkness swallowed everything. The next thing I remembered was hearing machines. Voices. Doctors. And Danielle crying. Or at least pretending to cry. At the time, I believed every tear. Now I wasn't so sure. The hospital room became my prison. Day and night blended together. I couldn't see, couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could hear. And hearing became dangerous, especially when people believed I was unconscious. Doctors spoke openly around me. Nurses discussed test results. Visitors shared secrets. And Danielle slowly revealed a side of herself I had never known existed. The first clue appeared later that afternoon. She thought we were alone. A chair scraped across the floor. I heard her sit beside my bed. For a moment there was silence. Then she laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just softly, almost affectionately. But it wasn't the laugh of a worried wife. It sounded relieved. "Everything's finally happening," she whispered. My pulse increased. The monitor immediately reflected it. Beep. 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 Faster. Danielle stopped speaking. The room became quiet. Then she laughed again. "Still hearing me, Marcus?" My blood froze. No. No. That couldn't be possible. She couldn't know. Could she? The monitor continued accelerating. Danielle stood. I heard her heels clicking across the floor. Then she leaned close enough that I could feel her breath. "If you can hear me, that's unfortunate." The words hit harder than the accident. "If you can't hear me, even better." She walked away. The door opened. The door closed. And I was left alone with terror. For the next several hours, I replayed every memory from our marriage. Every argument. Every strange moment. Every lie I had dismissed. Every explanation I had accepted. At 43 years old, I had spent most of my life believing I was lucky. Danielle was beautiful. Successful. Charming. Everyone loved her. Friends constantly told me how fortunate I was. And honestly, I agreed. When we met, I was working construction. She was a college student struggling to pay tuition. I worked double shifts so she could finish school. I paid rent, covered groceries, helped with textbooks, supported every dream she had. When she started her marketing business, I emptied my savings account to help launch it. $40,000. Every penny I had. I never regretted it. Not once. Because that's what husbands do. Or at least that's what I believed. Eventually her company became successful. Then very successful. Then wildly successful. The bigger her success grew, the more distant she became. At first it was subtle. More business trips. More late-night meetings. More unexplained absences. Then came the secrecy. Passwords appeared on devices. Phone calls ended when I entered rooms. Conversations became guarded. Still, I trusted her. 17 years of marriage creates powerful blind spots. You stop looking for danger because you assume you're safe. I was wrong. The following morning I overheard another conversation. This time it wasn't Danielle. It was two nurses. They thought I was unconscious. His wife seemed strange. Which patient? Room Sibaisha. A pause. Then the second nurse spoke. The coma patient? Yes. What about her? Another pause. The first nurse lowered her voice. I've worked here 11 years. Okay? I've never seen a spouse ask so many questions about life insurance paperwork. Silence. My stomach twisted. Life insurance. The second nurse sounded surprised. Seriously? Twice already. The room became quiet. Then footsteps moved away. I spent the next hour trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. There had to be. Maybe she was preparing for the worst. Maybe she was scared. Maybe. No. The rationalizations were becoming harder to believe, especially after what happened that evening. Around 7 o'clock, Danielle received a visitor. Coma. A man. I didn't recognize his voice, but she clearly knew him. Well? He asked. How much longer? Danielle sighed. Nobody knows. That isn't good enough. The man's voice sounded irritated. Relax. I've been relaxing for 3 years. 3 years? My heartbeat increased again. The man continued. We were supposed to solve this a long time ago. Danielle lowered her voice. I know. No, you don't. The tension between them felt dangerous. Then came a sentence that changed everything. The accident should have ended it. My entire body went cold. The accident should have ended it. The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed quieter. Neither person spoke for several seconds. Finally, Danielle broke the silence. Keep your voice down. You said nobody would connect it. They won't. Then why is he still alive? Alive. Not recovering. Not healing. Alive. As if my existence itself was a problem. As if my survival was an inconvenience. Footsteps moved across the room. Then the man spoke again. If he wakes up, he won't. You don't know that. He won't. For the first time since the accident, genuine fear entered Danielle's voice. And somehow that terrified me even more. Because guilty people fear the truth. A phone suddenly rang. Danielle answered immediately. Yes. Her tone changed. Instantly professional. Instantly composed. The version of herself everyone else knew. She listened quietly. Then said something that made my blood freeze solid. No, don't move the money yet. Silence. I said don't move it yet. Another pause. Not until we're certain. The line disconnected. My mind raced. Money? What money? What was happening? Who had I married? The visitor left shortly afterward. Danielle remained in the room. For nearly 10 minutes she sat beside my bed without speaking. Then, finally, she whispered something so horrifying that I felt every hair on my body stand up. Please stay unconscious. She sounded desperate, terrified, almost praying. Please. For the first time since the accident, I understood something with absolute certainty. My wife wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of me waking up. And just when I thought the situation couldn't become any worse, the hospital room door opened again. A new voice entered. Male. Older. Confident. Mrs. Carter, we need to discuss the offshore account. The room instantly fell silent. Then the stranger added 7 words that changed everything. Before your husband regains consciousness. And in that moment, I realized my accident was only the beginning of a much bigger nightmare. The older man's words echoed through the room long after he stopped speaking. Before your husband regains consciousness. For several seconds, nobody answered. I lay motionless beneath the blankets, every nerve in my body screaming for answers. Offshore account? What offshore account? The stranger finally broke the silence. Danielle, we're running out of time. His voice was calm. Professional. The kind of voice that belonged to someone accustomed to handling large amounts of money. Everything is under control, Danielle replied. Is it? A chair moved. Papers rustled. I've reviewed the numbers again. Another pause. Marcus controls more assets than you originally disclosed. My heart nearly stopped. Controls? What assets? I worked as a regional operations manager. I wasn't wealthy. Comfortable, yes. Rich? No. The man continued. If he survives and investigators begin looking into the transfers, questions will be asked. Danielle exhaled slowly. I told you he won't remember anything. You don't know that. The same fear entered her voice again. The same fear I had heard earlier. The fear of someone whose plan wasn't unfolding correctly. The visitor stayed for nearly 20 minutes. Most of their conversation revolved around financial matters I barely understood. Accounts, transfers, property records, signatures, beneficiaries. Every sentence made one thing increasingly clear. My wife had been hiding an entire life from me, and somehow that hidden life was connected to my accident. When the man finally left, Danielle remained in the room. For a long time she simply sat beside my bed, silent, thinking. Then her phone vibrated. She answered immediately. Hello? Her voice softened, far softer than it ever sounded when speaking to me during the last few years. The realization hurt. I'm at the hospital. Silence. Then she laughed. A genuine laugh. Warm. Affectionate. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. I miss you too. My stomach twisted. The conversation continued for several minutes. She spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. I know. Pause. Soon. Another pause. No, he hasn't woken up. My pulse accelerated. Don't worry. Silence. Then came the sentence that shattered whatever hope remained. When this is over, we'll finally be together. The room seemed to spin. 17 years. 17 years of marriage. Gone. Destroyed in a single sentence. I wanted to scream. Wanted to tear every machine from my body. Wanted to demand answers. Instead, I remained trapped. Forced to listen. Forced to endure. After she left, sleep never came. Not that night. Not the next. Every hour brought new pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. On the third day, a familiar voice entered the room. My daughter, Jasmine, 22 years old, fresh out of college, the best thing I had ever helped create. Dad. Her voice trembled. Please wake up. I felt tears forming behind my closed eyelids. She grabbed my hand. I need you. For several minutes she spoke about ordinary things. Friends. Work. Family. Then her tone changed. Mum's been acting weird. My pulse increased. She keeps disappearing. Silence. She's angry whenever anyone asks questions. Another pause. Dad, I don't know what's happening. I wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to warn her, but my body remained a prison. Jasmine eventually left. Minutes later, Danielle arrived. The difference between their concern was impossible to ignore. One person feared losing me. The other feared finding me. That evening I overheard another conversation. This one changed everything. A detective entered the room. I recognized the introduction immediately. Mrs. Carter, I'm Detective Harrison. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Danielle sounded nervous. Is something wrong? We're reviewing your husband's accident. Silence. The detective continued. The vehicle that hit him was recovered yesterday. My heart hammered. We found something unusual. Another long pause. What does that mean? Danielle asked. The SUV's GPS data was erased. The room fell silent. Is that important? Very. Paper shuffled. We're also investigating why the vehicle's registered owner disappeared the same night as the collision. Nobody spoke. Not for several seconds. Finally, Danielle forced a laugh. Are you suggesting this wasn't an accident? We're exploring all possibilities. The detective's voice remained calm. Professional. Dangerously calm. After he left, Danielle stayed motionless. I could almost hear her thinking. Then she pulled out her phone. Call me back immediately. Her voice shook. This is becoming a problem. A problem. Not a tragedy. Not an investigation. A problem. The next morning brought another revelation. 2 hospital employees entered while believing I couldn't hear them. One of them was the nurse from the first day. The same nurse who had heard Danielle whisper those horrible words. She asked me again yesterday. The nurse sounded disturbed. Asked you what? To notify her immediately if his condition worsens. That's normal. No. The nurse lowered her voice. You don't understand. Silence. She specifically asked whether there would be enough time to update paperwork before death was officially recorded. The second employee gasped. Coma. Seriously? Yes. A cold chill traveled through my body, the nurse continued. And she wasn't asking like a wife. What do you mean? She sounded like someone waiting for a transaction to finish. The words lingered in the air. A transaction. Not a husband. Not a marriage. A transaction. For the first time since the accident, I stopped searching for innocent explanations. There weren't any. The woman I loved wanted something. Something valuable enough to risk everything. Something valuable enough to make my death useful. And somehow it connected to money, insurance, hidden accounts, and a man she was planning to be with once I was gone. Late that evening, the final piece arrived. Another visitor entered the room. A man. The same man from before. This time he sounded furious. You lied to me. Danielle's voice instantly hardened. Lower your voice. You told me Marcus knew nothing. He doesn't. Then explain this. Paper struck a table. Hard. What is that? Danielle asked. The attorney found it. Silence. Then the man spoke words that made my blood run cold. Your husband changed his will 3 months ago. The room became completely silent. What? He changed everything. More papers shuffled. Most of the estate no longer goes to you. For the first time, genuine panic entered Danielle's voice. What are you talking about? He transferred the majority into a protected trust. My heartbeat exploded, because suddenly I remembered. 3 months earlier. A meeting. An attorney. Documents. I had signed after discovering irregularities in several business investments. At the time, it had seemed routine. Now it might have saved my life. The visitor sounded terrified. If Marcus wakes up, everything falls apart. And Danielle answered with a sentence that confirmed my worst fear. Then he absolutely cannot wake up. Then he absolutely cannot wake up. The words echoed through my mind long after Danielle spoke them. For several moments, neither she nor the man said anything. The silence itself was terrifying, because silence meant neither of them felt the need to deny what had just been said. Eventually the visitor spoke. You need to stay calm. Calm, Danielle snapped. The trust changes everything. What exactly did he move? Most of it. I listened carefully. Every word mattered now. The properties, the investment accounts, the development shares. The man's breathing grew heavier. You told me those were yours. They were supposed to become mine. The room fell silent again. Then footsteps approached my bed. Very close. I felt Danielle standing beside me, looking down at me, studying me. For the first time since the accident, I genuinely feared she might try something. The thought chilled me. A few weeks earlier, I would have trusted her with my life. Now I wasn't sure she deserved to be alone in the room with me. Finally, she stepped away. We need another plan. There isn't another plan. There has to be. Not if he wakes up. The door opened, then closed, leaving me alone. For hours, I replayed everything I had heard over the past several days. The affair, the financial secrets, the accident, the trust, the hidden accounts, the offshore transfers, the insurance questions. Every piece connected to the same conclusion. My wife hadn't been preparing for my death. She had been expecting it. The realization was devastating. Yet something else was happening inside me. Karma. The fear was slowly becoming determination. I wasn't dead. I wasn't gone. And if I was still here, then their plan wasn't finished. 3 days later, the doctors noticed something. A response. It started with my eyes. I couldn't open them completely, but I could sense light, shapes, movement. The darkness surrounding me wasn't as complete as before. Marcus? A doctor's voice. Can you hear me? My heart pounded. I focused every ounce of strength on moving. Anything. A finger. A hand. An eyelid. Nothing happened, but the doctor sounded encouraged. I think he's improving. The news spread quickly. Nurses discussed it. Doctors reviewed scans. And Danielle became increasingly nervous. I could hear it in her voice, see it in the tension whenever she entered the room. One afternoon she arrived with her attorney, not the mysterious man. A different attorney. This one sounded older. Professional. Careful. I need honest answers, the attorney said. What kind of answers? Did Marcus know about the transfers? No. Are you certain? Yes. Paper shuffled. Because if investigators discover unauthorized movement of assets, they won't. The attorney interrupted. Danielle, this isn't a game. The room became quiet. Then he lowered his voice. Federal investigators are already reviewing financial records. My pulse accelerated. Federal investigators? The attorney continued. The accident investigation is expanding. Nobody spoke. Several transactions occurred within 48 hours of the collision. The silence became unbearable. Then Danielle asked the question that exposed her priorities. What happens if Marcus survives? Not what happens if he's hurt. Not what happens if he recovers. What happens if he survives? The attorney took several seconds before answering. If Marcus wakes up and cooperates, everything changes. Everything. The word lingered in the room. Everything changes. For the first time since entering this nightmare, hope appeared. Small. Fragile. But real. Because everyone involved seemed terrified of one thing. My voice. Not my money. Not my assets. My testimony. That evening the nurse returned. The same nurse who had heard Danielle whisper those terrible words. She checked my adjusted equipment, then remained standing beside the bed. Quiet. Almost hesitant. Finally she spoke softly. Coma. Mr. Carter. Her voice trembled. I don't know if you can hear me. I listened carefully. But if you can. A long pause followed. I reported what I heard. My heart nearly stopped. Reported. I couldn't stay silent. The nurse sounded emotional. I became a nurse to help people. More silence. Not to watch someone be betrayed. For the first time since the accident I wanted to cry. Because someone believed me. Someone had listened. Someone had acted. The nurse continued. Keep fighting. Then she left. That night became the turning point. I felt different. Stronger. More aware. The fog surrounding my mind was finally lifting. I focused on my right hand. Every nerve. Every muscle. Every tiny sensation. Move. Nothing. Move. Nothing. Again. 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 Hours passed. The hospital grew quiet. Machines hummed softly. Moonlight filtered through the window. I concentrated harder than I ever had in my life. Move. A tiny spark of sensation appeared. Move. Something shifted. Barely. Almost imperceptibly. But it moved. My finger. One finger. Less than an inch. Yet enough to change everything. I tried again. The movement repeated. This time slightly stronger. At that exact moment, footsteps entered the room. A nurse. Not the same nurse. Someone else. She froze. For several seconds she said nothing. Then I heard her rush toward the bed. Oh my God. Excitement filled her voice. She looked directly at my hand. And then she shouted words that sent fear racing through every person involved in the conspiracy. Doctor, he's moving. And somewhere else in the hospital. Completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. Danielle Carter was still believing I would never wake up. Doctor, he's moving. The words spread through the room like an electric shock. Within seconds, multiple footsteps rushed toward my bed. Machines beeped. Voices overlapped. Someone adjusted equipment. Someone else called for additional staff. For the first time since the accident, hope was no longer trapped inside my mind. It was visible. Real. Documented. The doctors immediately ordered new neurological evaluations. The following 48 hours changed everything. My eyes opened first. Only briefly. Only for a few seconds. But it was enough. The bright hospital lights stung. Blurred shapes appeared. Faces. Movement. Reality. A doctor stood beside my bed, smiling. Marcus, if you can hear me, blink twice. I blinked. The room erupted. Months of medical uncertainty disappeared in an instant. I was coming back. And somewhere inside the hospital, Danielle was learning that her nightmare was becoming reality. The first time she entered my room after I opened my eyes, I barely recognized her. Not because she looked different, because she looked afraid. Terrified. She approached cautiously. "Marcus?" I stared at her. Neither of us spoke. For 17 years I had known exactly what her face meant. Now I couldn't read it at all. Fear. Guilt. Panic. Desperation. Every emotion seemed to be fighting for control. Then tears appeared. I was so worried. The performance would have been convincing if I hadn't spent weeks listening to the truth. I simply stared. She grabbed my hand. "I never gave up on you." Another lie. This time I knew it. She knew I knew it. And somehow that made the silence even heavier. Over the next several days, my recovery accelerated. Doctors were amazed. Physical therapists encouraged me. My daughter barely left my side. Jasmine cried the first time I spoke. "Dad." That single word broke her completely. She hugged me carefully while trying not to cry. "I thought I lost you." I squeezed her hand. "No." My voice sounded weak, but my determination had never been stronger. 3 days later, Detective Harrison returned. This time he wasn't alone. 2 investigators accompanied him. The room was cleared. The door closed. Then the detective asked the question he had been waiting weeks to ask. "Mr. Carter, do you remember the accident?" I nodded slowly. "Some of it." "What do you remember?" The next hour changed the course of everything. I told them about the black SUV, the strange conversations, the offshore account, the insurance discussions, the visitor.coma, the affair, and finally the words that started it all. "Let him die." The detective remained silent for several moments. Then he opened a folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, phone logs, bank transfers, evidence. A mountain of evidence. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, "your statement confirms several things we've already discovered." My stomach tightened. The detective continued. "Your wife transferred substantial amounts of money through accounts connected to an individual named Victor Reynolds, the same man. The visitor.coma, the man she planned to be with." The detective slid another document across the table. "Victor Reynolds owned the SUV involved in your collision." The room became silent. Every suspicion, every fear, every horrifying possibility. Confirmed. I closed my eyes. Not because I was shocked, because part of me had already known. A week later, Danielle was arrested. The news spread quickly. Family members were stunned. Friends couldn't believe it. Several refused to accept it, until the evidence emerged. Phone records, financial transfers, deleted messages recovered by forensic investigators, insurance documents, witness statements, and perhaps most damaging of all, the testimony of a nurse. The nurse who heard everything, the nurse who refused to stay silent. Her statement became a cornerstone of the investigation. Danielle's carefully constructed world began collapsing piece by piece. Victor was arrested shortly afterward. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he cooperated. And once he started talking, the entire conspiracy unraveled. The affair had lasted nearly 3 years. The offshore accounts were real. The financial transfers were real. The plans to remove me from the picture were real. What neither of them expected was the trust. 3 months before the accident, concerns about unusual investment activity had prompted me to restructure my assets. That single decision protected nearly everything. The irony was almost unbelievable. The very thing Danielle hoped to inherit became the reason her plan failed. Several months later, I finally left the hospital. The day felt surreal. Sunlight touched my face. Fresh air filled my lungs. Freedom felt different after nearly losing everything. Jasmine stood beside me, smiling, laughing, alive. The future no longer felt impossible. It felt earned. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. There wasn't much left to argue about. The evidence spoke louder than either attorney ever could. I never attended Danielle's sentencing. Some people thought I should. Others expected a dramatic confrontation. I wanted neither, because by then I had learned something important. Closure doesn't always come from revenge. Sometimes closure comes from walking away. The last time I saw Danielle was through a courtroom window. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. The woman I married had disappeared long before the accident. The person standing there was a stranger. Months later, I returned to ordinary life. Physical therapy continued. Recovery continued. Healing continued. Slowly, patiently, one day at a time. Some scars never completely disappear, but they stop controlling your future. One afternoon, Jasmine and I sat outside watching the sunset. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then she smiled. "You know something?" "What?" "You survived twice." I looked at her. The accident was only the first time. I laughed softly. For the first time in a very long time, the laughter felt genuine, because she was right. The accident nearly took my life, but betrayal nearly took something even more valuable: my faith in people. Thankfully, only one of those things succeeded. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I realized something Danielle never understood. Money can motivate betrayal. Greed can motivate lies. Fear can motivate terrible decisions. But truth has a strange habit of surviving, even when people desperately want it buried. And in the end, the truth that everyone thought would die in a hospital bed became the very thing that set me free.